everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for this week's episode of When I Grew Up. On today's episode, it is my pleasure and honor to welcome my friend, Pastor Paul Hong. Hey, Paul, how are you?
Hi, Blair. How are you?
I'm good.
It's my privilege and my honor to be on your podcast.
Truly, the honor is mine. I'm can't stop laughing because Paul is so ridiculous. No, I'm just kidding. You guys, I'm excited for Paul to be on today because we are longtime friends. Yeah, we're friends. Right?
I'm glad you questioned it because my mind was like, how do you define a friend? Not a bad thing. It's just
we have known each other for a while, and I would like to think that we're friends because of just the history of our meeting. Yeah?
Yes. That's a great way to put it. Yeah. I always would define somebody as a friend I've sitting down and eaten a meal with, and it left on good terms. So, there we go. So we've done that plenty of times. So.
I like that.
That's not
really
bad.
Good.
Yeah, it's not bad. Because I would always say you would never call somebody a friend you've never sat down and ate with, had food with, and then but you don't have a friend that you've not had food with.
This is true.
So I feel like that's a good minimum for friendship. I feel like.
Man, so I introduced Paul as Pastor Paul Hong because that's why he's here. He's going to talk about what it's like for him and how the journey has been towards becoming a pastor at a Christian church. I was going to say something about being friends, but anyways, it doesn't. If I think of it, I'll come back to it. But yes. I'm excited because I think we've had a pastor on before, and his insight was really great. But I think the perspective today will be a lot different. I think that me too. I think because we have this history of ministry together, I might even feel a little more comfortable kind of asking you questions that maybe people want to know but are too scared to ask a pastor. And I think I would appreciate the transparency that comes from you. You've never been one to hold back. So, I know what I was going to say, Paul, about being friends. So when I first met Paul, he was in this I don't know how to say it without being offensive. Don't be offended.
Okay. I'll try.
No, I mean you, which I would imagine it's been 10 years since Paul and I have been in the same room together, physically. But I would imagine you're the same. But at the time of when I met you, we were both early 20s, right? Super early 20s, and which is so crazy. 20s. And you were just super on fire for Jesus. I remember we were reading the Word together at a retreat, and you were just weeping, and there was a lot of new believers in the room, and I understood the situation.
I remember Romans 5. That's what I was reading.
Yes, you remember, right? And then everyone else was confused, and if you've never been in that situation, if you don't know, right, this kind of conviction or the weight of, I don't know how to articulate this well, but the truth of God, I guess. And it was just coming, I could tell it was just coming alive for you off the pages. And you were just so broken. And I admired that so much. But anyways, all this to say, I was having a conversation with Paul in my car. We were going somewhere. And you guys, Paul broke my faith for a good 3 minutes. Because I was like, what are you saying right now? We were talking about prayer. And then you were asking me I don't even remember the questions, honestly. But they were good questions, right? Because my personality is just, I see it, I believe it. I don't need to do the research. I don't need to question. It's just my personality. It's who I am. But,
Yeah.
there are thinkers like you and my husband David who are like, but why?
Yeah.
And
It's
how?
always
And
that question. Why?
yeah, and then I'm like, why does it matter? But anyways, we're friends now. It was fine. Always.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of our friendship ended in tears. Like a lot of our meetings, there was a lot of tears involved.
No,
The
but
times
that's
I visited, yeah. Yeah, I was gonna say the times I visited, for some reason, we saw each other, and it was like I said something and you cried, and that was like the thing that went on for a while. It was just like I would visit, and then you would end up in tears for some reason, or vice versa. I would say something stupid and offensive, or something like that, and you
but
would
that
cry,
is
and
what
I'd feel
makes you
really bad.
so endearing, Paul, and truly, truly like no, but I think it was I mean, honestly, it probably was just things that like uh whether they were like questions about my faith or just like brutal honesty about something, right? Like something like people just don't talk to me about. And I really, if looking back, I appreciated it, right? Because like I think a lot of those questions led me to search God's word more and understand, be more self aware of what I believe and what, what I believe, I guess. And
Yeah,
so I'm really grateful.
I'm glad. I'm glad it worked towards the growing of your faith, as opposed to resentment and bitterness towards me.
But I will say,
No,
oh man, I don't know. I kind of thought about if we were going to talk about this on the podcast. We don't have
sure.
to.
We don't have to, whatever it is.
But I think for a long time, right? Like,
Mhm.
okay, oh, sorry, I'm talking a lot. You're my guest, but I'm like talking a lot.
Okay. I'm better working off of somebody than I am on my own. So yeah, go ahead. I don't
um,
mind.
I okay, so Paul and I met at church. David and I were looking for a Korean immigrant church to attend. Where before we attended this church, we were going to an American multi-ethnic church, and we just had heart and conviction to return back to the Korean immigrant church. So, where we landed, Paul was there, you were there, and then some stuff happened. Like in the first couple months that we were there,
Golly,
um,
that was only a few months in too.
yeah,
Man,
it was like
golly.
2 or 3 months that we
Like
were
2 or 3
there.
months. That's right. And
And
David wasn't even there. He was like visiting home or something when it
yes,
all went down, I think.
yes.
Yeah.
And well, okay, you talked about this on uh David Shin's podcast, did you not?
Did I? I probably did. I imagine I brought it up, maybe. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay, well, anyways, some stuff happened where um there the pastor at the time um did some shady things and was let go, and there was a lot of consequence because of the shady things that happened, that in turn left David and I in a situation at this church where we just had to take up some of the leadership roles. And Paul was like in transition. You were in transition to go to seminary at this
That's
time,
right.
and so you
Right
had to
around that time.
leave, which was the right thing to do. But I think when you would return every now and then, I was still recovering. And so I think in my head, without even realizing it, you kind of symbolized this like
No, I understand that.
past
Yeah.
situation that I had to revisit every time you came,
Yeah.
and which was not your fault, obviously, but
No.
if I look back on it now, I can see why maybe I had a tough time, or having tough conversations with you, or
Mm-hmm.
and I have no idea, you guys, if this is making any sense. I feel like I'm talking very like ambiguously and like not clearly, but all that to say, when I
It was
say
a
that
hard time.
Paul and I, our history binds us, is because we're just in a short 3 months amount of time. It was very concentrated in the life experiences that we went through together.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a dark time. that we went through together. Yeah.
For sure,
It
for
was,
sure.
yeah, it was so, what a weird time that was. Even just looking back, and I've talked about it multiple times with multiple people.
Mm.
Um and it when I look back on it, it really was such a weird time. And I still, almost on one level, I still kind of feel bad for leaving at the time. Like, and like, but like you
Yeah.
said, like it is what, where the Lord led me. Um, but yeah, it was a hard time. Yeah. And I
Mm.
hate it. That was the worst part about it, was like you guys, you and David being 2 or 3 months in and just having to be like picking up the pieces of what
Mm.
happened,
I
on
don't
your
know if we
own. And
picked
it
up
just,
the pieces, but we just were
you just swept them
available at
into
the
a
time.
trash can or something. Whatever you did with those pieces, you had to do it by yourself, and I felt really bad. Yeah.
But all that to say,
We're friends now.
we're friends now. We're
Yeah, there you
friends.
go.
But we should get into what it is that you do, Pastor
There you
Paul.
go. It's
Um,
actually not a bad place to start, because that is where I went off to seminary, like just during that time,
this is
right
true.
there.
This is true.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I can certainly start there.
Okay, so how old were you then?
10 years ago, that's 22, 23. I probably
Oh
just turned
man,
23.
babies. We were
Look at
babies.
that. Just straight fresh, just fresh from the garden, whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
Oh goodness. Okay. So, but I have to know, I don't really remember. So when was it that you decided to be a pastor?
Um, probably the November before, I think.
The year
Um,
before that.
literally the year before. Like, I mean, maybe right after you guys came, like started,
Mm.
or maybe right after you guys visited. Probably because I think that's around the time you guys started
Mm-hmm.
coming out,
We
right? Was
came,
that like
yeah, I
that
think
November?
like September, October
Okay,
even. Yeah.
sure, yeah. I mean, I think I'm sure it was November that I figured out, because what I was doing at the time. So I have a good friend, who I really look up to as just like a fellow brother and pastor and things like that. And he is now, he wasn't then, but, or no, actually he was then. But anyway, and he had memorized the entire book of Philippians, and I was competitive. I don't know, it was something dumb. So I decided, just gonna memorize the book myself, and I'm gonna do Galatians because it's 2 more chapters longer, so I could beat him, which is so stupid. But I only got through one chapter. But it was in the middle of that chapter, and let me actually find it here really quick. It was in Galatians chapter 1. The Apostle Paul is describing his calling into apostleship, and he's describing his conversion. And at the time, at the same time, while I was memorizing that, while I was trying to compete with my other friend to be a super Christian, we, I was kind of trying to figure out what I was supposed to do. Again, I was 23. I graduated from Baylor, my undergrad at Baylor University, with a film degree, so nothing to do with ministry. I became a Christian right at the end of my time in college, and so unfortunately, 4-year degree from a private school suddenly felt like meaningless, because I just found Jesus, and I just way more interested in the Bible suddenly, as opposed to TV shows and movies. Um, but and so, but I graduated in 2010, and for the 2 years I moved to Atlanta to take up this internship with that pastor, because he was my pastor when I was in high school, and he had moved over to Atlanta. And so, I had called him up, and I ended up in Atlanta, and he, it was my first job, quote unquote, out of college, was a youth internship. And so I was there, and just during that time was a time of just kind of going through stuff, growing in my faith, and discipling a few kids, and things like that. And by the kind of around that time, like I said, it hit that point around 2 years or so. I was trying to question, like, what am I supposed to do?
Mm.
Like, am I supposed to be a pastor? Am I supposed to be a missionary? Do I try to go into the film industry, like using, and maybe just do that? And so that question coincided with me trying to memorize Galatians, and it came to his testimony, or the Apostle Paul's testimony, in verse, I'll just start from 13. So he's talking to the Galatians. He says, "For you have heard about my former way of life in Judaism, I intentionally persecuted God's church and tried to destroy it. I advanced in Judaism beyond many contemporaries among my people because I was extremely zealous for the traditions of my ancestors. And this is the part where it just everything kind of shifted for me in terms of like my decision to go to seminary and be a pastor was, but when God, who from my mother's womb set me apart and called me by his grace, was pleased to reveal his son in me. And so all that, all kind of like was asking all or answering all this question up to that point was like, why was I saved? To what end is this? And he's talking about why he was saved. Like he knew God had set him apart from his mother's womb for a specific purpose. And he said, to reveal his son in me so that I could preach him among the Gentiles. Like that was it. I was like, so Paul was set aside by God from his mother, predestined, all that stuff, so that, and he was persecuting church. He wanted to destroy God's church. And then Jesus appeared to him, blinded him on the Damascus road, came out, and now he's planting churches instead of destroying them. And he knows that his sole purpose was that he would preach to the Gentiles, people who don't know God yet. And for whatever reason, my whole heart just shifted when I heard that, because maybe it was just because of that question at the time that I was, struggling with, trying to figure out the answer to. And then just the clear, straightforward answer from the mother's womb to the point he was at, he suddenly knew that he was meant to preach. And I was like, huh. And for some reason that resonated really strongly with me. And that's when I told my pastor, I was like, I think I want to preach. And he affirmed that in me. I think affirmed that gifting or competency in me at that point, in my few years of being a Christian at that point. Though I was raised in the church, but just I didn't become an actual follower of Christ until after right at the end of college. But he affirmed that gift in me and recommended that I go to the seminary that's in Fort Worth, Texas, Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. So that's how I ended up seminary, was just that. Now, but we can, from there, we can go from there. No, I was going to go into a whole other thing, but we can.
Okay. Well, I mean, one, I did not know that, and that's amazing because I feel like for me, that's so clear, right? Like that calling. And I've heard a lot of different stories, right? Like about how pastors feel called to be a pastor. I have a question. Do you feel like, I think I asked this to the other pastor too that was on, I can't remember now, but do you feel like there needs to be that calling?
I'm so glad you asked that, because this is maybe the one thing that I felt like I wanted to be clear on today's podcast was that I don't. Like, and I say that because, and I feel kind of weird saying it because like the story I just told you, the testimony I just had, like feels like that, right? Like there was a clear moment or whatever the case is, but biblically speaking, if you search the New Testament, you will never find that word associated with being a pastor, a calling. Now, I think we use it as a colloquialism, like it is just the word we use for that. And I think we all know what it means, or what we mean by it when we say I'm called to be a pastor. We mean it like in the sense that like, oh, I was destined or something to do this, right? This is the thing that I'm purposed for, and so on and so forth, right? And we say that about a lot of vocations. Like you were clearly called to be a furniture designer or make roller coasters at Disneyland. Like that is what you were called to do. You're so good at it, right? But in the Bible, like in the New Testament, you do not see that at all. The word the New Testament uses is an aspiration. You could even say, if you want to break it down a little more, you just want to be a pastor. You just have a desire. Now that desire obviously comes from God, but the way we think of the word calling is a lot like Old Testament calling with prophets, like Moses seeing the burning bush, like God called him through the book to lead his people out of Israel, right? Or out of Egypt, right? And it's not the same, because a prophet is different from a pastor. A king is different from a pastor. Like it's a totally different office. An apostle, like Paul is an apostle. He was called from his mother. Like he used the word calling there, and that's the appropriate use of the word calling, biblically speaking, because the apostles don't exist today. It's a specific, special role that God called these specific people to in specific context and specific time in history. But pastors are not called in the same sense that prophets and apostles and are called. We aspire, we want to be pastors. We're gonna try, you know. And that's kind of how I have to, like, I look at my thing, was just like a desire was born in my heart at that time, and it continued enough for me to, and it grew and continued enough for me to continue finishing seminary and take on the role that I have today, you know. So so calling wouldn't be the word I use, and I would actually just warn against it on one level, because there's danger a lot of times that comes with that, is people will abuse that. It's like they'll do something very shady or questionable. It's like, but you know what? I'm called to be a pastor. You can't fire me. God wants me to do this. You know, like he put me in this, but he anointed me, gave me all this gifting, whatever and they could be a gifted speaker or charismatic leader or whatever the case is, and people will let things go because because he's called to be a pastor, right? And the reality is, like, that's not how the Bible paints pursuing being a pastor at all. It's an aspiration. Paul tells Timothy in 1 Timothy 3, like, he says, like, you aspire to be an elder, good for you. It's a good job. It's a good thing to do. And then he lists, like, here's what you need to be and do to qualify to be a pastor. He just gives a job description almost. And that's it. Like, it's almost, on one level, it's almost like any other job. And so, yeah, I would say the first thing, if you're wanting to be a pastor, or is like, well, do you want to be? You know, like, is that the question? If that's something you aspire to be, and don't do the whole thing of saying, like, because I hear this all the time too. I would never be a pastor, you know, but God called me, so I had to. It's like, then get out. Like, you don't have to. No, you don't. Because God didn't call you. Like, you wanted to be. Like, either admit that you wanted to be a pastor, or admit that you are here under some sort of false pretense. Maybe you shouldn't be in this position. You know, like, that's kind of how I've landed in terms of that word, and how we use it in ministry a lot, especially these days. So. Yeah.
No,
now,
I'm
sure that most people don't use the word calling in the way, like, in a like an evil, like, dark way, like I described. Like, they don't mean it. So I understand when people say, I feel like, oh, God called me to be a pastor. Like, I get it. But yeah, I just wonder if maybe our language needs to adjust a little bit within contemporary ministry to
I mean,
use the word the Bible uses, right? So
right. And I haven't given it much thought, right? Because, like, I just kind of go this far and then I stop there. But you know, I appreciate everything that you just said, because for me, there's a lot of, like, even just, like, revelation in what you just said, and insight that I feel like can provide clarity for not just even being a pastor. Like, there's something to that, right? It's like, what do you want?
yeah,
You know, like,
exactly.
If the want is not there, how will you do the rest of it? Like,
exactly.
And I mean, you guys, being a pastor is no walk in the park, okay? Like, not just that, anything you do, right? It's not going to be easy if you want to be good at it. And so I hope this relieves some pressure off anybody that's listening, whether it's being a pastor or anything else, right? Like, I really like that, Paul. Like, what do you aspire? What do you want? What do you want? Like, but I definitely feel that there is this, like, we kind of, in our own brains, and this thing that we've made up, even sometimes, like, oh, I don't feel called, so I'm not going to do it, you know, or like you said, like, oh, like, I didn't want to, but then there was this conviction and I mean, like, which conviction is real, right? Conviction is real, and it's because of our convictions that it leads us to do things that we want to do, hopefully. But yes, I completely hear what you're saying, and I agree with it, because it definitely, it shouldn't be that hard. Right?
Yeah. It's not like it's not magic.
It's not.
Because I think a lot of people think that, and I hope not only for those, you know, who are listening who desire to be a pastor, but people who have pastors and they look at their pastors in a certain light, because you think, oh, the glory of the Lord is shining from their bearded face, like that kind of, like, No, it's not. Like,
Mm,
the guy just worked and studied really hard to be where he's at because he loves the church, he loves Jesus, and
yes,
he
yes.
wants to explain the Bible to people and make it much clearer, the work that Jesus has done on the cross.
So
Like,
good. That's so
that's
good.
like, it's very. I mean, I hope I didn't like, like, what's the word, demystify anybody with that, but like, I just think that's the reality. It helps alleviate a lot of
Mm,
pressure for me, because like, what if I lose my I've heard that terminology, lose the calling of a pastor. It's like, what do you mean by that? Like, do you mean disqualify yourself, which that you can absolutely do. Like, you screw up, you can disqualify yourself from
mm,
from being or becoming a pastor, right? um but because you were never called to be a pastor, you can't lose your calling, like. So pressure's off, guys. Like, do you want to do it? If you can do it, go for it. Let's try it.
oh, that's good. Interesting. I'm glad I asked it. um,
Me too, because that was the biggest part I wanted to get
yeah,
across.
yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so you go to seminary, and is it like everything you thought it was going to be?
No, not at all.
So simple. So yes, I love it. I love
Guys,
it.
I'm just straightforward like
No.
that. Yeah. No, when I look at my time at seminary, so my path in seminary was a little weird too. So I moved to Dallas. I was there for a year, or Fort Worth, at Southwestern Seminary. I started my seminary journey there. But my parents are missionaries with the International Missionary Board, and they were living in China. But my dad was doing a missions degree at a different seminary, a sister seminary, a Southern Baptist seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, called Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. And and he was paying my rent because I was 23 and immature and not having to hold a job and so on and so forth. And so he was telling me, you know what, hey, you like, what is it, like, I don't want to pay two rents, like, because I have to move. He had to come back to the States to finish his degree one semester, and he was paying he's like, I don't want to pay two rents, just transfer, like, it's the same degree. So I was like, okay. And at the time, like, Southern was at the time probably the more prestigious of the two, between the two seminaries. So I was like, okay, so I went that way. And my dad graduated and I stayed another semester, and so I had another year at a different seminary, a sister seminary. But during that time was like maybe the darkest year of my life. Like, wasn't able to
I'm
have a
sorry.
good
So you
community
moved to
around me.
Kentucky?
Yeah, I lived in Kentucky for 1 year.
What?
Did you not know this? I guess you didn't. Yeah,
No.
obviously. By your facial expression, I should know that you don't know this. But yeah, I lived in Kentucky for Louisville, Kentucky for 1 year, from January 20, I guess that was 2013 to 14. Yeah, something
Oh
like
my
that.
gosh. Okay.
Yeah, so I was there for for 1 year. That summer in between, I took an internship in New York at a church that my pastor friend had started a ministry at, and so I did an internship in New York for like 3 months and came back and finished my time at Southern. But again, it was like the darkest year of my life, probably. I can
Mm.
probably say that. Just really lonely, wasn't able to create good community. I remember this moment. I just told this story today to somebody else, actually, but there was this. I was in a church history class. It was like an early church history class. There was a substitute teacher at the time, because the church history teacher at the time was like super well known, and so he was off doing something else. But at the end of one class, and this was like, at this point I was kind of deep in it. I was in this dark place and I was super lonely. I didn't have any friends, like all that stuff. And this sub kind of just at the end of it, like end of the class, is like, hey, like, seminary can be actually a really hard time for some people. Like, it can be super lonely. It's hard to make community. Like, he's hitting all these things in my heart, right? And he's like, and if this is you, is there anybody like that in this class right now? Like, I would want to take you out to lunch, and anybody else who wants to join, like, maybe we can just be around that brother, and things like that. And I was silent. Like, I didn't say a word, because I think I was just embarrassed to say. I was like, I have no friends, and I was just in front of all these other dudes in my history class and things like that. But man, like, I never stopped thinking about that moment. Like, just because I was like in the pit of my loneliness, and I just
Mm.
didn't take that opportunity of like to just be in the light, just because I was a little too embarrassed about it,
Mm.
honestly. And it's maybe one of my biggest regrets. I do still have some regret, maybe one of my biggest regrets. But at the same time, when I look at my life now, like, it's like, I wouldn't trade anything for what I have right now. But yeah, I do look on that and I cringe because I'm like, man, like it was
Mhm.
really hard during that time, and I really could have used it as a friend. But it did lead me to where at the end of that year, I went back to Southwestern, where I did have a community. I had made friends my first year at Southwestern, and I just went back to it, and I finished my degree there. Um, but yeah, seminary was an interesting experience. I did learn a lot. I was around people that I didn't necessarily agree with a lot, and that so it was challenging in that
Mm.
sense. I had to Seminary is a time where you start planting flags, where of things you believe in and want to stick with as you enter the pastorate.
I see.
And some stuff you have to deconstruct. Like you're like, what do I believe about this? And maybe what I believed about it is no longer what I believe in now.
Mm.
Hopefully not the most important things like the gospel and Jesus and so on and so forth, but maybe about what you believe about divorce and remarriage or something like that.
Mhm.
Like second tier, maybe third tier issues. Um, yeah, and so that's kind of what seminary in a sense does, like it just kind of helps you find your footing and what you're going to do and what are you going to take as you enter into the pastorate. And that's essentially what it served for, what it did for me. I will say though, I probably did not use my time in seminary as well as I should have.
Oh,
So
why is that?
yeah, I think because like during that time, like um I probably could have just studied harder. There were some classes I just didn't take seriously. Some classes that didn't deserve to be taken, I would argue, but man, there were just some classes there. Like Southwestern, especially back then. I think it's actually a whole lot different now. Probably better off right now. But back then, there were just some classes. There's some classes, some teachers there that were just like, yeah, like I don't even without being too I don't want to be offensive or anything, but like, yeah, it just like I don't know if the irrelevant is the right word or if it was just unhelpful. Like I
Mhm.
just never used the things that I learned,
Yeah,
maybe may
yeah.
have learned at class, or or maybe the teachers there, a lot of them were like older, and so they're a little out of touch with what was happening with ministry these days,
I
that kind of
see, I
stuff.
see. Yeah.
And so what the stuff they were talking about was just like, I don't know how this kind of applies, maybe it's my responsibility to figure out how it applies, but it was one of those things like, yeah, it was just I don't know, it was just one of those things. So when I do again when I look at my time in seminary, it was a time for planting flags on hills, but hills that I'm willing to die on, get rid of some things that I didn't believe anymore, loosen my grip on some things, tighten my grip on some other things. And at the same time, I probably could have done more of that, just and I
Mm.
didn't, just because I maybe wasted time watching too much basketball or video games or something, like a 20-something-year-old would at the time with that much freedom, So, but yeah, yeah.
Um, okay, can you speak to this idea that some people might have, maybe even including me, that like
Mhm.
seminary kind of like what is that? There's this thing people say like seminary kind of messes people up. Like that like, that thought they
Yeah.
knew things
Mhm.
and then they go in and then they actually come out like, do I really believe in God? Like what is that about?
Yeah, I mean there's been books and articles about stuff like how to stay Christian in seminary, things like that, right?
Mm,
And I totally understand understand it, and a lot of it will depend on like where you go and
I see.
what like denominations could matter, like what theological camp you land in, like Calvinism or something like that,
Mhm,
Arminian,
mhm.
stuff like that, right? Like um and yeah, a lot of people when they go through that, I think they can get jaded, they can get kind of burnt out,
Mm,
um, because on one level you go from like a like especially if you're like a young Christian and you're excited, you're on fire for the Lord, all that stuff. And then you go into an academic setting, which is what it is. Like,
mhm,
there's no doubt about it. Like, seminary is school.
mhm.
It is not where people like sit together and pray. It's like you're writing papers. Like, well, you pray at seminary.
I know, I know.
I mean, that
I
stuff is
know.
there, okay? And there are a lot of godly, good teachers and leaders and mentors that you can find in seminary, which I found some. I mean, praise God for that. But it is school. Like, you have deadlines to meet. You can fail. Like, you can, man, languages, biblical languages, like the motivation to learn a language that nobody will ever use outside of your circle, like, is really hard to, if you're not a self-motivated person in the first
Right,
place,
right.
or it can be a drain. Yeah, like it can be really hard to get through sometimes, because it is like at some point you kind of lose focus about what you were doing there in the first place. And not on top of that, like if you were like, I mean, I remember listening from the other podcast with the previous one, previous pastor who was on here, like there could be family issues where like your family doesn't want you to, they don't support you, so financially you're trying to figure stuff out. Like there's life, there's you have maybe a kid, like so many people are having kids at the same time, and you're trying to manage that. And on top of that, maybe you are doing ministry at the same time while you're at seminary, and that's a drain as well. So you're like push and pull, like trying to be a faithful pastor and husband and father and student, all at the same time. And so, yeah, it can be a really huge strain on some people, and it can really sometimes, it could wreck your faith, which is really unfortunate. People come out of it with trauma, and unfortunately, some people will come out of it with things that they didn't expect, and things not going their way. So, so it's not for everybody. Like it really isn't. One thing I did think. Your friend on the previous podcast about being a pastor did say was that I wholeheartedly 100% agree, is that local churches produce pastors, not seminaries.
Yeah.
Like he said that, and it's a very good 100% true statement, is that local churches produce pastors, not seminaries, right? Seminaries, and I'm somebody who I think, and I've been back and forth on this, but I think at this point I would say, yeah, you should go to seminary. It's not required. It's not biblically mandated that you have to get a theological education before, but you should probably, if you're going to be a pastor here, especially here in America, you should go to seminary. Like that's, and it's not, again, like you don't have to, but like the education that you'll receive, like mainly you need a theological base, you need to learn biblical languages, you need to learn church history. Like those are the main things that you'll need to go, and obviously you'll need some practical ministry experience as well, and all those things like you can get at seminary. That's what it's there for. Like those three main things: languages, theology, and history. Like that's the main things you'll need from seminary mostly. So like if you are going to be a pastor, like I would always encourage anybody, if you're thinking about being a pastor, to go to seminary and then deeply ingrain yourself in a local church that you can serve. If you can. Whether that's just a normal member and just being a good member, or taking up some sort of ministry position.
So how long is usually a seminarian track?
So the typical degree is called the Master of Divinity. I know it sounds like Sorcerer Supreme, like Doctor Strange stuff, but
it does.
But a little bit, right? Or a Harry Potter degree, maybe from Hogwarts or something. But it's called the Master of Divinity degree. It can take. I've seen people do it as fast as 3 years, which feels way too fast. Like knowing what's there. But I did it in 4.5 years, and I think that's kind of normal. 4 to 4.5 years is pretty normal for that degree. Again, but I've seen people do it way quicker, and I just don't know how they do it. Like, I just can't imagine them retaining. I mean, even though again, I think that's 4.5 years is what is it Pastor James? Was that?
Yes, Pastor James. Right. That's right.
Pastor James. Pastor James. I don't want to keep calling him like that guy.
The other guy.
But Pastor James, the other pastor. Pastor James also, he said 4.5 years too. I think that's pretty normal. I would say. And for that particular degree, there are degrees that like say you don't need to take the languages, for example. Like that's and that'll cut down the time. It'll give you a theology and history and maybe some other things, but where you don't have the biblical languages, and it's still at some form of master's degree that you can use in ministry.
Why wouldn't I want that though?
Well, I was actually going to ask you this because I was listening to now that podcast with Pastor James. Was that about a year ago, a little over a year ago when you did that?
Yeah, it was about a year ago now.
About a year ago, right? Yeah. I was going to ask you because in that podcast you had mentioned that you thought about going to seminary.
Yeah.
Did that ever happen, or?
I mean, no, it never happened.
Okay.
David and I still talk about it. I think just, our season of life with the kids and
With the
David's
kids. Yeah.
bivocational too, and just balancing.
Yeah.
The thought of it makes me want to throw up because cause I just want to put my best foot forward and everything, right? But David's like, oh, I mean, like, even if it takes us 10 years, like, we should just do it. And I'm like, yeah, like, I'm down, but I know I'm not making
Yeah.
any moves towards that right now in my life.
Sure. Sure.
But David and I obviously find it very valuable. I think if you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have been like, no, thank you. Or even earlier than that, just because there was no want. I didn't want to, like I did not want to.
It's a good reason not to.
And so,
Yeah.
and like, I think even, that for you, right? Like you were like, what should I do with my life? I also had a film degree, this. And like, I was
Right.
like, what am I doing? And I did not use my film degree, but I'd like to think I'm using my communications
You
degree right now.
produced
But
ice. Yeah, that's what you were doing. You did the ice skating network and
yeah,
stuff like that,
yeah.
right?
So I
As a
mean, I did
producer, yeah.
some TV
You
stuff,
did.
but
I did literally nothing.
yeah,
But yeah, you did some.
but
No,
me
I
too.
produced some youth videos for like
Oh
YouTube
yes,
videos.
I remember this. Yes, like it was yesterday. I remember actually, so clear. They were really good actually.
Oh, please.
Uh,
Yeah.
but like I think me too. I was like, oh, like just because you love Jesus, right, and
Mm-hmm.
don't know what to do with your life, you should not go to seminary. Like, is what I
Yeah.
thought, and I still feel that way, honestly.
I think
Like,
that's a good way to feel.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so, as you know, I have taken on the children's pastor role at our church since then, and of course, like there is this weird. I don't know what to call it. It's like, because they call me in Korean, they call me 전도사님 at our church, right? Which is not a
Mm-hmm.
pastor. It's just kind of like this
Minister, I think is the right
minister. Yeah,
technical
minister.
term.
Thank
Yeah.
you, a minister,
Mm-hmm.
which I am. And children's, is a different animal than it is, with the big kids and like the grown-ups. And
Grown-ups.
I find so much value in like foundational teaching, right? Whether it's in following Jesus, or even like previously I worked with kids when I was coaching figure skating, and I even in that, right, there was like this passion and desire that I had for, like, if you know the basics, if you lay down a good foundation, when you begin to build on top of that, obviously you're gonna have it'll last longer. Like it'll stand forever. And so
Yeah.
I find a lot of that, like that's where my passion comes from when I am teaching our students. And now that David and I have children of our own, even more so, right, that I want to pour in. But yes, do I find myself limited in certain things that I feel like seminary could definitely provide me? Absolutely.
No.
So yeah, there's a desire, but also like a fear of like not being able to like do it well.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, I get it.
And then,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, and then like
And the yeah, sorry, go ahead, keep going.
oh no, I was just gonna say, and then like I know that it's hard. It's not easy. Like it's not,
Yeah.
and so like I don't want to do something hard right now. But if I'm honest, if I'm just being transparent, but yeah. But what were we gonna say?
Yeah. Well, the reason why I even asked at all in the first place was, well, because seminary is not. No, I shouldn't say that. Like there are there are degrees for people, or maybe not even master's degrees, but like they call it, like I think they call it like certificates. Maybe I'm not even sure what they like, something like that. And it's just a way easier track. Takes way less time, less commitment, all those things, right? And it's maybe that's what you need more at this point. Like you don't need an MDiv, Blair. Like I would say, like looking at your situation, you don't need the same degree. You don't need to learn Greek and Hebrew so that first-year-olds can understand what it means to follow
Right,
Jesus.
right,
Like right, they're like this. Well, these Hebrew. This is a yod. This is how they. No, you don't need to do stuff like that with your kids or other kids, right? But having like foundational theological ideas, like a I don't know, a systematic theology where you can build their theology about who God is, about who Jesus is, and try to explain the Trinity to them and fail at it because everyone fails at it. Like you can do that. Like,
Yeah.
and seminary will help you parse those ideas out, and then even maybe equip you with practical ways to do that with kids. You know,
Yeah.
because there's like a master's degree called a Master of Arts for Children's Education. Like that's a lot of people who are in children's ministry go that way. And so, yeah, I'm just saying there are degrees out there for every level of ministry, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And
that's good to know.
It's worth exploring. It's
yeah,
worth exploring.
Definitely. Thanks for sharing that with me. And yeah, that's really good to know. You know, you don't there's comfort in knowing you don't have to get your master's in divinity. Although, you know, as Asian Americans, I'm sure if you're going to be a pastor, you might as well just go for it.
My degree should be hanging up here somewhere, but I have my thunder, flag thing instead. That's more valuable to me, I think.
Than your MDiv.
Yeah, than my Master of Sorcerer Supreme.
Oh man. Okay, so you get through seminary, not get through, but you know, graduate.
I made it.
And so you graduate with your Master's of Divinity. And then what? What do you do? What do you?
Yeah, what do you so I guess while I was in the last year I was in seminary, I served as a youth pastor at the church I'm serving at now, actually, right now. But I just did it for 1 year. And at the end of my time, or near the end of my time there, right before I was about to graduate, I was also about to get married, and a lot of things coming together all at once there. But I just realized I kind of like I think I needed more like practical training, is what I felt like after pastoring for that 1 year with the youth kids. And so I kind of started looking into internships and found a church in California, in Brea, California, called Living Hope Community Church, and discovered kind of a lot of things kind of lining up there. Like my mentor at Southwestern at my seminary, he like was discipled by the senior pastor there at that church, and my aunt knew my aunt knew him for the senior pastor growing up in California. He apparently got his degree at Dallas Theological Seminary, which is around here too. And so there was a lot of connection there. And so, I applied for the internship and I ended up getting it. So my wife and I, we got married in July and moved to California, like almost right after. And so we lived in California for 1 year and did an internship there. And it's kind of like it was way bigger than my church. It's like a mid-large size church in California. It's an Asian American church. And I learned a lot there. I think biggest thing I learned is my wife is my greatest asset in ministry. I think.
Say it again, Paul. Say it again.
My wife. No. But it did reveal it, because like I just realized like one of the biggest things I probably took away from that is like I don't think I could pastor a church that big. I'm not equipped in that way. I look at Pastor Steve Chang over there, and man, he was so like, it was a privilege to like learn under him for the short time I was there. But I just realized more and more, I was like, yeah, I'm not that guy. I'm not Steve Chang. Like he has so like a gift of administration and leadership and these things. And he's so good at finding people's giftings and utilizing them and leveraging them for, and things and putting people in the place. Like he was so good at that. And I'm like, and that's how you get to a church that size almost, I mean, it wasn't a mega church by any means, but it was like more than I think I could have ever done, and he obviously had a great team of leaders and things like that. And I just realized coming out of there was just like, yeah, I don't think I could do this. Yeah, I not like this. I can't do this. Yeah, for sure. I need something more scalable down, and there was still a lot of things I picked up on that were really helpful and useful during that time in ministry. But yeah, but biggest thing was just like, Anna is super good with people. And I'm so glad she's around for me, because I realize I'm not like super good with people, like not at first. I think at first, like I'm an acquired taste, I think. Like I think once you get used to me, like like I think the only person I've like forced my way into their life is Sarah Paik, like just because she was around all the time when I was living in Atlanta.
Sarah Paik, also on the podcast, Data Analysis.
There you
episode.
go. Check that episode.
Yeah.
But most other people, it's just kind of like I meet through other people and we're in a group setting and they think I'm funny and I manage to keep making them laugh, and that's just kind of how things happen, but for the most part, I'm really bad at initiating conversation and I get awkward and uncomfortable, like I'm all that. But and what's so funny is Anna feels the same way, but her results are vastly different in conversations with strangers. Like for example, like a perfect example is last weekend I went to this alumni event for Baylor because Baylor's was in the March Madness bracket. Like they just got knocked out by North Carolina, unfortunately. But they set up this thing at a big food hall area where they had a big screen. They showed the Baylor game. And so a bunch of my old friends were there from college, which I hadn't spoken to in a really, like maybe longer than 12 years, longer than than to talk to you or seen you. But I was there, and I was, while we were driving there, Anna was feeling really awkward. She was like, I'm so nervous to meet your old friends. Like I'm gonna feel really uncomfortable and awkward and blah, 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 and so on. So, and I remember I was driving and I was like annoyed at her. I was like, Anna, no, like stop. I'm so jealous of you. like you have this ability where people walk away from a conversation feeling really like well heard and known and cared for. like that kind of thing.
That's fun. I mean, I'm going to let you finish your story, but I just want to affirm this about Anna because I've only met her once in person, and it was impressionable because you weren't even like, you guys were just dating. Both of you came to our wedding. Sorry, I almost said my wedding again, honey. I'm sorry. But I always say my wedding. And I know this warmth that you're talking about because I only met her once, and I felt like, wow, like she's really great. But anyways, okay, continue.
Everyone says that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So I'm telling her this as we're driving to the event, and then I meet some old friends, and everyone's like hanging out and talking, and she's already talking with people and things like that. And at the end of the event, we're walking. Some of us are walking out together, and this one girl that I knew from my freshman year there, she like comes up to me, she's like, Anna is so great. Like she was just like, I don't know if she was just being nice, but they were talking for a while. Like I had seen them talking for a while and stuff like that. And she's like, wow, Anna's so great. And I'm like, and I looked at Anna, I was like, I told you, like, this is you, like, you do this. Like I'm with friends that I've known like, 10, 12 years ago, and she probably knows them better than I do right now, just because how like people just like spill their deepest, darkest secrets to them. She's that person. And even half jokingly, and I think I didn't really realize this at the time, was when I was interning in California right after we got married. The mentor pastor, the senior pastor there, C Chang, he like jokingly introduced me and my wife to like the young adult group there, and he kind of jokingly, but I think he meant it, and he probably sensed it before I even realized it. He said like, hey, this is Paul, and the best thing about Paul is Anna. Like he said that, like to this group, and I was like, oh, thanks, Pastor Z, But then I realized like over years now, I was like, how did he see that from so far away? Like I didn't even know that, like that she probably is the best thing about me, like to especially in terms of ministry and meeting people and having people like just like feeling comfortable and things, like even when she feels super awkward and uncomfortable, like because she feels that way, but I'm like, no, like Hannah, you don't have to feel that way, like just go do your magic, and make people come to our church, things like that. So I don't remember what the question was.
You did an internship is what you were talking about, because I asked you what you did after, but you realized during this internship one of your biggest assets in ministry was your wife.
Was my wife. There you go. Yeah.
But I love that. Wait, by the way, didn't you guys meet in seminary?
Yeah, we met in seminary. So Anna has an MDiv as well. She also just finished her a family. A biblical counseling degree at Dallas Theological Center. She just finished back in January.
Oh, wow.
So she studied counseling, and so she is actually in the process of trying to get my children to grow up a little faster so she could take her licensing degree.
I see.
Yeah. So she's kind of in that in-between phase right now, so she can get licensed and start an internship and start doing counseling and stuff. But but yeah, that's kind of where. So yeah, I finished that, and then after California, we moved back to Dallas, and so that's where she started her degree after graduating with her MDiv at Southwestern, and then, um, and then we started attending my old church that I was youth pastoring at,
Mm-hmm.
and the April of the following year we came back. So I guess that was April 2018 is when I kind of officially took on like a position as one of the EM pastors, and yeah, that's I've been there since April, about around April 2018 in the
Oh
position I'm in
wow!
now.
So that's been like
Mhm.
2018, 19. So 4 years.
Almost 4 years. Yeah, that's kind of crazy.
So you're okay. My next question is this. So you said the uh internship church that you were at was an Asian American church.
Asian American church.
Okay,
Yeah, so
so
everyone's English speaking. No KM, nothing like that. They were mostly Korean American, but pretty diverse, honestly. Yeah.
okay, have you always wanted to serve at a Korean immigrant church?
I don't know if that's ever a choice I consciously made.
Uh-huh.
um I've always found myself in that. Now in seminary, I was a member of like a, I don't like calling it an American church because all churches in America are American technically, right? Uh but like an American church.
Okay.
And yeah, and it was called the Paradox Church. It was downtown Fort Worth. It was really great. They had like just church planted, and I think they were in their like fourth or fifth year when I had joined. And yeah, I just kind of grew in my faith a lot there. Like it was really helpful to be there and stuff like that. But that was the outside of that. Yeah, I've always been in a Korean American / Asian American setting. I think even being at that church made me realize like how much more comfortable I am in an Asian American / Korean American setting than I was
Mm.
in like an American setting, even though I was there for like I forgot how long I was there, um, but yeah, and even though it was a great experience there, and I made a lot of like some of those people I met at that church, they were like groomsmen in my wedding, like I made some really good friendships there. And so, but in terms of doing ministry, it was so different. It's so different. I'm much more weirdly, and I didn't think I would be that way, but I'm weirdly more comfortable, I think, in a Korean American / Asian American setting. I feel like, I don't know. Yeah. So
Um,
again, I don't know if it was a conscious decision I made
okay.
to like, yeah.
It's weird because you don't speak that much Korean.
Oh, thank you,
No,
Blair.
wait.
I
I'm
appreciate you
no.
calling me out like that.
Why is
No,
it
I'm just
weird?
kidding.
Why is it?
I'm just,
I'm asking. I'm asking.
no,
There's
I
a
just,
question mark at the end of that statement.
I didn't know you were asking, but what was there? No, never mind. Sorry. Okay, I see what you're saying, and it's true. Yes, my Korean is very poor, um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know, but like I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just my upbringing, like going to Korean churches my whole life, just what I've known just my whole life. And so maybe it's just a
Hmm.
comfort thing. Even though like I do have a lot of, I don't know if criticisms though is right there, a lot of like critique, I feel like, about how KMEM relationships and all that kind of stuff work. Um, but yeah, I just find myself more comfortable there than anywhere else, I guess. But I'll have to say my church, right, is, I would almost say, I shouldn't say unique, but it's rare in terms of a KMEM relationship, in the sense that I'm very independent. The senior pastor at my church, he is very hands off. Like the one thing, like we functionally like function as our own church almost.
Hmm.
We have our own membership. We have our own membership covenant. We have our own deacons. Like we just installed 3 deacons last like a few weeks ago. Like, um, and the only thing we really share is a budget. Like they pay me, the KM
Hmm.
pays me. Like,
Hmm.
essentially, that's kind of how it's worked. And on one level, and I think that's a really unique situation, because when I look at some of my other pastor friends who are in an KMEM setting, there's a lot of oversight over their ministry from the KM side. Um, and yeah, and I have very little, if anything at all. Um, I don't know if that's a trust thing. I don't know if that's an inconvenience thing. I don't know what exactly it is that makes it work, but it works. And I actually really appreciate it. And weirdly, being in that situation, like, because like I imagine that a lot of people who are in KM EM settings right now, like on the EM side, and their KM has some oversight, is that the EM is asked to do a bunch of stuff from the KM side, like maybe some extra thing, like if there's a special joint service, they're asked to like do a play or something like that, right? um, but and I hate that. Like I really like, even when I was doing youth ministry, like at the same church, like they asked us to do something, and I'm like, I don't choreograph dances. I don't like, I'm not a praise dance guy. Like I was a film major. Like I'm behind the camera, not in front of it kind of guy. Like, but it did give me the idea. Like maybe I could record a movie, and that's what we did with my kids. Was like I wrote an entire script and it shot a 10-minute movie with my youth kids, and we presented it at a Christmas. It was like a Christmas play. We did it 2 years. I can't believe we did it. It was the most stressful time of my life, but I have 2 movies on YouTube somewhere wandering around.
Oh man, I gotta check those out.
I'll send those to you. Like those are ridiculous, but it was fun. When I look back on it, like at the time it was stressful. I hated it. Yes. I had my wife and the children's pastor at the time to like translate, do Korean subtitles for me, because everything was in English. I didn't know how to. And and it was so stressful, and the kid trying to get all the kids together, trying to get all the kids involved because the parents were complaining and all that kind of stuff. Like but when I look at it now, it's just good memories. It was like, oh wow, this is so funny, like dude, it was good times. But man, so all that to say, the EM is a lot of times EMs are asked to do things like that, and like it's stressful, and I hate it. It gets in the way of other things like preaching and teaching and one-on-one. Like it just takes up that time instead. And but being in the situation I'm in now, where my senior pastor is really hands-off, it weirdly makes me want to like help them and do stuff with them more. I don't know what it is. Like I don't know if it's like like the whole like young second gen guilt that we feel towards our parents, kind of thing that makes me want to like, like that you grow up and you realize, oh, actually they cared a lot for us. They just didn't know how to do it, like they just try to figure out, because what do you expect from people who live in America who don't know how to speak English, like trying to raise their kids, like that kind of thing. So because I've grown in that empathy, I like now want to rub shoulders with them more, as opposed to I think when I was forced to be with them, I didn't want to be with them, and maybe that's a second gen mentality too. I don't know. But all that to say, yeah, it weirdly worked out that way, where it works out that way. I'm like, I'm the one reaching out, hey, do you want to do a joint service for Easter service, something like that. Like I'm the one initiating those conversations as opposed to the other way around. So yeah, it's a very weird, I feel like a very rare situation I'm in, and I love it though.
No, yeah, I think that's wonderful. I think it is very rare, and you and I are maybe 2 of the rare ones, because the church that I currently attend and serve at, also we get a lot of autonomy, and our head pastor, and he's always been for us, and so yeah, and I feel bad like for my other friends that are in ministry, right? That they have a really hard time sometimes. And it's not to say anything bad about our first gen KM counterparts. I think it's just how immigrant churches have built the system in some ways. I'm about to get on my soapbox, but we'll just stop here.
You don't have to. Let's go.
No, but yeah, all that to say, like, I think that what you said is true too, right? Like, it's like when we're given the space, right, and the trust, I don't think it's like they're lazy, Paul. Like, I think they trust you guys.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I hope that's the case.
Yeah, definitely. And, and I when that happens, there's no longer like this forced relationship, right? It's like an actual relationship. And so, yeah, so it's good. That's great. I think that's really awesome. And I mean, how else can one thrive in what they want to do? I was going to say calling, but what they want to do.
See, I'm already influencing people.
Yes,
right?
Yes, I'm totally influenced right now, and I'm going to continue to be that way, and think of you every single time.
I hope so.
But yeah, that's really good. I probably could talk to you all night about ministry and being a pastor. But for the sake of time, I'm curious, like, what is it, like, what does an EM, or you mentioned actually before we start recording, you are a part-time EM pastor. For those of
Yeah.
you that don't know, just a quick rundown, Korean immigrant churches, especially like the ones Paul and I attend, correct me if I'm wrong, okay? Like, I'm just trying to summarize this quickly. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's a Korean immigrant church. It's usually made up of two different ministries, what we refer to as KM, which is Korean ministry, which means these people in this ministry, their first language is the Korean language. And the second ministry is called EM, which is an English ministry. And there's
Mm-hmm.
an umbrella of the KM. And so like Paul mentioned before, the main thing is finances, to be honest. There is some expectation to do things together. Usually KM, because I think, honestly, because of our culture too, right? Like there is this hierarchy of authority that's in place at depending on where you go to church, okay? Depending on where you go to church. It's different everywhere.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so sometimes there is this expectation from the younger generation to, uh, what am I trying to say? Do the
Yeah,
things
there's
that the
like a
older generation asks us to do.
yeah, yeah. And it is like a parent-child almost
Yes,
relationship. And
yes.
in some cases, literally a parent-child. Like it'll be like KM's children are attending the EM and they just kind of grow there because they're learning English. They're going to school and learning everything English. Their friends are English speaking, so on and so forth. They kind of forget their Korean heritage a little bit. It's kind of a mixed bag there. Whole identity crisis that happens around the teens and 20s, and then you call jaded, you hate the Korean church, and then now you empathize because you realize
Exactly.
they went 고생했다, they went
Oh
through a
my
really
gosh,
hard
oh my gosh,
time,
that's perfect. That's perfect. And I mean, even I still find myself like referring to them as the adults. Like the adults like
Yes, I've been trying to kill that in my members. All my members still do that. Yeah, the adult service. It's like you are 27 years old. You cannot call them the adults.
like
If
we
you're
are
not an
the
adult,
EM
then what are you doing
adults.
here? Yes, exactly.
No, I totally, yeah. I so yeah, the adults
Yeah.
just finished. But anyways, okay. So I was, but the main thing, right, is like we share our finances, and usually KEM pays the staff of the EM.
Yeah, typically is what that's very typical. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. I mean,
Mhm.
I can't, again, yeah, typically. Obviously, I don't know what happens at every Korean immigrant church, but what was I saying? What were we going to talk about though? What I was going somewhere with this.
Yeah, you were, and I got
Oh,
lost
oh,
quickly.
oh.
Sorry.
So what does a typical day for you look like? You're telling me you are
Mhm.
part-time
That's
as
right.
an
That's right.
EM pastor. So what does your life in day-to-day look like then?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned the word earlier describing your husband. I'm a bivocational pastor. So what that means is I have two vocations. One as a pastor, part time, in my case, and he brought that, and she brought up the finance is because they typically in a typical KMEM setting, full time usually isn't given to the EM person. It's either because they feel like it's better spent on another minister on the KM side, or maybe a children's minister or something else. Or they just don't have a big enough budget for it, and that's the case at my church. Is that we're a smaller church, and there's just not enough for more than one full-time pastor. And I've made my peace with that on one level because Paul talks about tent making, and that's kind of where the idea of bivocational ministry kind of sprouted up in a biblical way. Is that Paul, like when he was ministering to churches, he apparently made tents for a living, so that he wouldn't be a burden on those church members. Like he didn't want them to support him financially, and so he supported himself so that that would not get in the way of their life as he ministers to them. And that's kind of the same mentality and approach that I've taken with my church, is that
Mm.
while I would love it if I could be a full-time pastor, I understand our situation, and I don't want to burden them, with be a burden financially for them to just try and make it by, while we have so many other costs like building costs and so on and so forth, right? So, and paying other staff that we need. And so because of that, I have to take another job in order to take care of my family. I'm married, I have 2 children. And so I actually work at a company called Guidestone Financial Resources, which is a like a retirement company for Southern Baptist pastors and other people in ministry. Honestly, anybody can open a thing there. I think they just have to like sign a statement of faith or something like that. But I just work in a call center. Like it's customer service. They forgot their password and they have to call me and I have to like let them log it, like help them. And they're like 60, 80, they're like 80-year-old people, like an
Right,
80-year-old lady is
right.
calling. They're like, it's like, I've never used my computer before, help me, like that kind of stuff. And it takes like 45 minutes to change a password.
Oh,
Like
Lord.
some of those calls can be really, but the bills get paid. I have benefits and insurance and time off, all those things. Like it's a great job that I can clock out. I don't have to worry about. Right after I clock out, I can focus on my family or do ministry things and so on and so forth. And so it pays the bills, and I'm super grateful for that job. Even though some people might look at it as something like, "What are you doing with your life? What is your degree?" It's like, well, that's not my main job.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
my main job is to be a pastor. That's how, and this is really just to support that more
Mm.
than anything else. So I'm okay with it not being, I'm not passionate to help people log into their, to their retirement accounts and tell what their account balance is. Like that's not my
Yeah.
joy. And what drives me, gets me up every morning. It's the pastoring part, and this helps me to do that as free as possible without burdening my church. So yeah, so that's kind of why I'm in this situation I'm in. This isn't ideal by any means. I mean, I would encourage any, if you're a member of a local church and there's a way for you to be able to support your pastor financially, then you should. Like I think the Bible actually is pretty clear that like members, if you're able to free your pastor up from having to get another job, like then you should help them to do that in whatever way that might look like.
Mm.
But for the season of life that I'm in, I'm okay with this, and going to continue to do this for the time being. And God willing, He might provide something more for our church that I can continue to, or that I can be a full-time pastor there. But for the time being, this is good, and I'm grateful. So.
No, yeah, I think that's really great. But when do you have time to like prepare sermon and stuff?
Yeah. so no, I guess your original question is what is my day-to-day kind of
Uh-huh.
look like. So I have a 980 schedule. So that what that means is I work 9 hours a day, and then every other Friday I get off.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's kind of I want to say it's sort of a new thing. Like a lot of companies have taken
Yeah,
up. They
I've
realized, oh,
heard
they
this
don't have to do like
before.
5 days of work. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. So instead of doing like a 8 hour every day, Monday through Friday, they just kind of give an hour extra on 4 days and then like adjust it on the whatever other day so that they have that day off. So I'm fortunate to have gotten that schedule. And so what I end up doing is I work during the day. I clock in at 7:30, finish at 5:15 every day. Usually Mondays and Tuesdays, I'm using that evening to spend time with my family. Usually, this is again typical. Now, I'm also on like a fusion schedule in terms of like going into the office or working from home. So I
Okay,
can work from
okay.
home.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
And so my scheduled days to be at home are Monday and Tuesday. Wednesdays and Thursdays, I go into the office and work from there. And then Fridays, everyone's required to work from home. So Mondays and Tuesdays, I'm there. But Wednesdays, I go into the office, and the office is actually is only like 20 minutes away from my church. And so what I end up doing is on Wednesdays, we actually also have prayer meetings at 7 p.m. And so I'll go from work, I'll clock out at work, go to church, get ready for that, do prayer meeting, and then come home. Or actually, my wife will actually let me stay at church so I can work on my sermon.
Okay.
And so I spend a few hours, and I get home pretty late, because I'm trying to get as much as I can done. And then Thursday, go to work, clock at 5, and I'll go back to church again and finish the sermon by Thursday night, or at least as much as I can, before I might try to find an hour or two during Friday or Saturday to knock it out. Yeah, and so that's kind of where, and so I think I usually end up spending between 8 to 10 hours preparing for sermons during the
Wow.
week, usually on the Wednesday, Thursday, and a little bit on Friday, Saturday. That's usually how that ends up. I prepare a devotional for Wednesday, the prayer meetings. Now I'll go ahead and say the pandemic really changed it really impacted how we do ministry with our EM right now. So it changed a lot. Like we went from what was, I guess, pretty typical, which is, I don't know, like I wish I could show the whole order of service, but it's like like we would do like 5 songs, 3 in front, 2 in back, like a bunch of prayers in between, 45-minute sermon, all that. Like just I would say that's pretty typical. But now we're like kind of really stripped down and bare bones right now. And we have been since the pandemic started, essentially. Part of it because we were online. Part of it is when we started gathering again, we didn't want to be in the room together too long because we couldn't properly socially distance. And even though we're all wearing masks, all those kinds of things. And it's just kind of been that way. And I realized at this point, so my group is really small. So we have, I believe, 11 members on roll. We have about 14 to 15 people come out every week. So it's, again, super small group. So we're kind of, I'm limited on resources. So I lead worship too. Like I essentially do the whole service. I know it's kind of tough. It's tough. Honestly.
It must be so difficult.
Yeah, no. No. But for the time being, but again, this is pastoring.
Yeah.
Like that's like, you have to understand, in my situation, if you're at a smaller church, like you kind of have to be good at everything. If you're in a situation like Pastor James's, you're in a mega church, you have plenty of resources, plenty of people serving and stepping up in those capacities. Like, what a blessing and a gift, and they should not take that for granted. Because for me, it's like I'm kind of doing most of the work in terms of, at least on a Sunday service anyway. I'm fortunate enough where I have members who are super supportive, and like there was one week like I came in and the whole place had been cleaned up, like and it just 2 or 3 guys came out and just cleaned the place up for us. Like I was like, and they didn't tell me, I was just super like 감동, super, like I was like really blessed by that. But yeah, like a lot of that falls on me. A lot of those smaller details end up falling on me. I have to prepare the Bible studies. Like we've decided when we stopped small group, I never started small groups up again, just because I can't do it. Like I just don't have the time anymore. Maybe if I did have kids, I'd be really more. But at this point, it's like I don't see my kids on Wednesdays and Thursdays because I'm at church or work all day. Right? I wake up before them and leave to the office and come back when they're asleep. So I don't see them on Wednesdays, or except if they come to prayer meeting. But yeah, like so that's it. So I'm like Wednesday and Thursday, I don't see them. And then Friday, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go to work. I get to hug them in the morning and I go into my office to answer old ladies' calls. So, but yeah, that's just kind of the life of a bivocational minister, I suppose. It's tough. Like at a small church too, in my particular context, we're just doing a lot of the work. And again, I feel stretched pretty thin a lot of times, trying to maintain all my responsibilities and stuff. But at the same time, I think this is just the season I'm in. I've just grown a lot in the midst of all this, and and much more grateful when I have time for my kids, my wife, and the short times we do have together, the quality time we do have together, and friends are super supportive, family super supportive. So I have a lot of blessings in the midst of what feels like a very tight and busy life, I feel like. But yeah, I hope this doesn't discourage anybody from pursuing ministry. But yeah, just also at the same time, you should know what you're getting yourself into. Like, just because you go through seminary doesn't mean that you're gonna be David Platt or Billy Giglio, John Piper, or somebody like who just you think has it made. But you may not even know the whole story even with them. So
for sure.
But yeah.
Okay. Okay, by the way, I had no, you're amazing. That's amazing. That's amazing. I say this like hesitantly, but like I think you should know, like, man, like I know your response is gonna be like, because I do it for Jesus, and I know that that's where your hope is, but truly, Paul, like, I'm so proud of you. like I know it sounds crazy, I know it sounds so weird, but like it's really such a gift and a blessing for me to hear, you being exhausted for the Lord, and I am excited, for the blessings that will come with your faithfulness, and so but I have to ask, because unfortunately, right, like the commonality a lot of times I can't speak to the American, or the American church, quote unquote.
Do this. Yeah.
But as far as the Korean church goes, like there is this term that is used quite often, right? And it's burnt out. Like,
Yeah.
and so how does one that does everything, do you feel burnt out or do you grit through it? How, or do you believe in this term or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I hear that term a lot. I do want to avoid it. I don't feel burnt out.
Praise the Lord.
Yeah, but now that I think about it, like I've never thought about that question just in terms of myself. But I don't know why either. Like why I don't feel burnt out. Like I feel a lot of people in my situation would maybe at this point 4 or 5 years in would maybe feel burnt out a bit. Maybe I'm not doing enough.
No.
Oh, maybe I should be burning out.
No burnouts, please. We can't have any burnouts.
Right. But I know what people like go through. Like, man, like I hear, unfortunately, and that does get thrown around a lot within KMEM settings, and which is really unfortunate. And usually that is because there is some pressure from the other side to maintain some sort of status quo there, I think, whether it be number of members or like number of baptisms or like, are they doing enough? Are you reading enough? Are you like all these things that you're supposed to meet? And I believe KM, like, I think Korean ministry, like it's so different in the way especially how they train pastors. Like there is a lot of, like I remember when I was in Atlanta, I actually specifically remember seeing this, and it kind of just stuck with me. So when I was you're still at Hanvision, right?
I am. I was just trying to make
try
it
not to.
so
I'm sorry.
obvious.
You can edit that. I'm so sorry. You can edit that out.
No, it's okay. It's fine.
David, I'm sorry.
Full transparency on the When I Grow Up podcast. Okay.
Yeah, that's how we do things here. So when I was there, interning there, like I remember there was like a guest speaker for the Korean side at one point, and we had to like do childcare. So I don't remember what it was, but I remember the guest speaker had this guy following him around, like the guest speaker did. It was another Korean dude.
Okay.
He was in a suit, and this might have been before you guys even had come. I'm not sure, but I just remember he was following around with this notepad and like just writing stuff down, like just literally following him around like this. Like it was like who is that? Like, and I realized it was like his assistant or something like, or an associate pastor who was learning or training, and I remember at one point, like I remember seeing the main speaker guy get like a little frustrated with him about something. I don't know. It was all in Korean. I wouldn't know what he was saying, but I remember just seeing that was a frustration. And I'm thinking like, is that how that works? Is that how pastors get trained? And I think that was my impression for a long time. And I think even I heard from somebody else at that church that people are more like they look at training up pastors, younger pastors, as like almost like military training. Like you were supposed to go through suffering, and it's supposed to be causing it, and it's supposed to be hard and difficult. You're gonna neglect your family, like you're never gonna see them again. Like this kind of like almost mentality, like you have to give everything up, and they take that as part of doing ministry training to be a pastor. And unfortunately, I've seen I've seen I suppose the end of that, what that results in. The children's pastor that I used to work with when I was at the church I'm at now, and he ended up taking another position in California. But when I was in California, I met up with him, and he told me that like his daughters, he has 2 daughters. His oldest daughter had come back from school, and the day they were supposed to like draw something, and they were supposed to draw their family. And so apparently she had come back with a drawing of just her mom and her sister and her dad was not in the picture. And it was just, and he was saying it's just because I'm just not home, because I'm at church all day, every day, like that kind of stuff. And so seeing that, I'm like, is that it? Like, is that really? And unfortunately, I've seen that a lot. Like so many pastors in training under like Korean senior pastors, unfortunately, like they sacrifice a lot of time at home to be at church, to do whatever they need to do, whatever it is that they're doing,
Mm,
which is really, really unfortunate. And I don't know that that's healthy or good.
yeah.
I wonder if, I don't know what it's going to take to change something like that, but it's kind
Yeah.
of, I don't know if that's still ingrained in the culture. Like that was back then. I
Right.
just don't know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I just don't think that's healthy. I don't think it's biblical,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
are you really caring and discipling for your family if you're at church all the time and your kids don't even know you? Like at what point are we saying, where's the line there where we're saying this is getting to the point of like sinfulness, and that's what's really tough when I see that. Yeah. Now, I'm sure there are churches who are like Korean churches and Korean ministries much healthier who care more about things like that. But just what I've seen so far, it's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really tough to see that and think that like that's how things work. And God forbid that's the only way that all Korean churches or ministries work. But yeah, I just hope that this idea of like suffering and causing, as much as that is in the Bible about suffering, that Christians are going to suffer, but it doesn't have to be like self-inflicted. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know why that has to be the case though, so yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think you're right. The term burnout comes from this maybe a culture that's already ingrained that we don't even realize exists. And then there's an expectation, as someone that's part of the Korean culture, maybe not fully immersed into it, but
Mhm.
that we feel like we have to live up to. And then when we don't meet those things, like you mentioned, like the status quo, right? Like the
Mhm.
expectation that's given. And yeah, and then people burn out or fall into sin or temptation.
Happens.
That yeah. But anyways, I'm so glad. I praise the Lord that you don't feel that way. It just means you're in the right place. I feel like, and it
I hope
seems as
so.
though you're being resourced in a way that is like allows you to thrive, Paul. And I think that's so amazing. And thank you for speaking like just transparently though on the topic itself. I really appreciate your
No, for sure.
thoughts. Um, I we have to wrap it up because I could literally I think we could talk for hours.
We probably could, huh?
but I want to know, for me I feel like it would be obvious what your answer would be, but like what do you love most about being a pastor?
What do I love most?
Surprise me. Just kidding.
It's the money. It's just all the money I get from being a no,
That's
just kidding.
a good one.
Oh no. I think how should I put this? I think the challenge, I think the challenge of it is what I love most,
What?
in a
That's
weird way. In a weird
surprising.
way. Yeah,
Shocking.
I
I'm
know.
shocked
And
actually. Like no
well,
joke.
it's like there's like, especially in the way we've been doing ministry, like it's been these, especially the end of last year was a really tough couple of months,
Sure, yeah.
just for myself personally as a pastor, especially in my role. We had a few members leave, and if you have 15 members and it goes down to 11 members, it feels like a huge,
Yeah.
like as opposed to 100 to 95, like it's
Right.
it's a totally different effect, right? So it was a super discouraging time because we had a few people end up wanting to dip, and so it was really discouraging, and so it really kind of made me question about like, what am I doing, and is it my fault? Like, what could I be doing better, so on and so forth. And weirdly enough, we had a Christmas party near the end of the year, and the people who came had a really good time, and um, since, for whatever reason, I will always remember that Christmas party as the thing that kind of shifted for us.
Mm.
Weirdly, because so another thing about me, like, so I don't really like retreats. I don't know about
Okay.
you, and in the sense that, like, so I'm a person who thinks Christianity or our walk with the Lord shouldn't be from one big event to the next big event to the next big event.
Sure, yeah.
And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of ministries function that way. They need to keep putting on events to keep the crowd interested and going, and so on and so forth. Which I I I get it. Like, I understand that. But because I realized, like, in the long run, for followers of Jesus, like, I think that's not very healthy. Like, it's like fast food. And we need some healthy food, which means just a regular, steady diet of something. And so I'm realizing more and more that Christianity is not just one, like, it's not like one huge, like, emotional commitment to Jesus. It's like 1,000 million tiny commitments, and like, and it's just a continuing to try and follow those commitments out, and so that's my philosophy in terms of that, right? And so since I've kind of held on to that, like, I've kind of pushed back against people who are like, hey, are we ever gonna have a retreat, or we're gonna do some sort of fellowship or something? Like, I'm like, if you do it, and then they never do it, so I'm okay. Like, like, if you plan it, and but that Christmas party started to change my mind a little bit, because I'm realizing, and this is my own fault, and this is maybe something even obvious, but I just needed to see it happen, that people need time to just, especially if they're not like super close and things like that, there are times like a retreat or a party or something like that can open up a lot of stuff. And for whatever reason, like, that Christmas party was that. After that, like, it was in particular, I won't say names, but it was in particular, there's this one couple who always, like, they've been coming out to our church for a while, but like, they felt kind of like distant, like they didn't feel like part of the group. And we're a small group, so if you feel outside of the group, it's like you might actually be outside of the group, because we're just like one group essentially. And so he and she, they were kind of feeling a little outside and stuff like that. But they've been super faithful in the sense they try and help out, they try and serve and be helpful and meet people and be outgoing and all that stuff. They make the effort on their end anyway. And but on the other side of that, like, some people thought they were like kind of like, I don't know if weird is the right word. I don't know. Like, they just like, for them, they couldn't click. I don't know what it was.
Sure, yeah, of course.
Yeah. And so because of that, it was always kind of weird. But then after that Christmas party, they all just started hanging out. They realized they have a lot more in common with each other. They started gaming. I think everybody in my church plays like computer games except for me and my wife. But they all connect on that level. They all like me, hey, let's get on League of Legends and just game for hours and hours, and so they started doing that. They started inviting each other to each other's houses for dinner and things like that, which never happened. And so now we actually feel like one collective group all after that Christmas party.
That's great.
And so that's like starting to like shift my heart, like question my whatever conviction or whatever I had about being against retreats or like these like kind of like just big quote unquote events that we have to plan and put up and stuff like that, like, because it's like, yeah, every now and then that might not be a bad thing. Like,
it's not, Paul. Maybe it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah, I guess, box of French fries every now and then is okay.
Yes.
And I'm learning that, which is, I know it feels like such a, like, I mean, I think maybe you knew me when you knew me. Man, I think I'm so different in terms of my ministry philosophy.
There's no doubt in my mind that your thought process, or not thought process, your thoughts and what you believe to be is probably much different than when we knew each other. Yeah.
And I've gone back and forth on a lot of different stuff.
Man, we got married. We had 2 kids, 4 between the both of us. Like, a lot's happened.
Wow, so yeah, but yeah, so that was, I don't know. I will always remember that Christmas party as something that shifted in our culture, at our church. And so in that, all of that to say, those things, those challenges are the reasons and the results and the things I learn and how I grow and things like that. All of those things are the best things about being a pastor, I think. Like the growing, the maturing spiritually, the realizing I'm wrong and being humbled, The small victories, like even though people left now, now it feels like the group we have is more tight knit than ever, which is something they all
Yeah,
desired
yeah,
before those people left. Like
yeah,
the people who left like felt like we weren't tight knit enough. That was part of the reason why they left. But then suddenly they leave, and now we're all tight knit, you know.
yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
uh, yeah, and so yeah, the whole back and forth and being able to experience that as a pastor and watch it and be a part of that has been a joy. Yeah, as challenging as it's been. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's
Mhm.
so good. I actually really love that a lot. Um, so I ask all my guests the same question at the end of our interview and our time together. And by the way, if I think I already thanked you, but I want to thank you again. Just your transparency today has meant so much to me, and I'm sure to many people listening. Um, But yeah, do you have any like last words, any advice for those thinking about going into ministry, being a pastor, or just, any life advice at all?
Yeah. Yeah, I was trying to think about this, and so I'm going through the book of Colossians with my church, like as a sermon series, and we just got finished with verse 15 to 23. That's the whole image of the invisible God, you know, firstborn of all creation. If you're familiar with that passage, um, and the application I had for that sermon, I think really would really fit well for anybody who's considering being a pastor. So I had 2 points. First one was capture a grand vision of who God is.
Mm,
Okay, so you need to see that God is much more than wish fulfillment. Like he's not a genie. God is not a career consultant. Like you just go to him to figure out what job you should take. God is not a therapist. Like he's not there just to take care of all your emotional needs and things like that. He is the king of the entire universe.
yes.
He created the cosmos. The universe spins on his pinky. Like he is huge and way bigger than anything we can think or imagine. Right? Um, he has authority over everyone and everything, whether they like it or not. Right? Russian president, Ukrainian president, our president, he is the king over them, right? And he rules over them. They are there because he allows them to be. He permits it. Even Satan and his demons and evil forces and angelic forces and forces of good, God is still king and authority over all those things. And you need to just capture that and soak in as much as you can, the ocean that God is, right? As much as you can. Um, because if you start going down the other way where you box him into this little tiny he just and as important as those smaller things, small quote unquote smaller things are, about like he is a comforter. Like you're in times of sorrow and trouble, he calls us to go to him and cast our burdens before him, and those things, those are all good. And I would always encourage anybody to go to the Lord with the little things, right?
Mm,
But don't think of him as a therapist or somebody you just like kind of lean on or whatever the case is. Like go to him knowing that he's the king of the cosmos, right? That he, like a therapist can give you advice, but he's the one who can heal you, like that's the difference,
mm,
like in a sense. Like if you think of him too small, like the God you're preaching is probably not a big enough God,
mm,
if you're going to be a pastor there. So first thing would be, if you want to be a pastor, make sure that your God is a really huge God, right? Big enough for anything, right? The second thing, second application here that I would pass on pastors is you need a grand vision of the church. Okay,
mm,
so you have a big God, and his wife is really big too. uh, so the church is not just community. It is very minimum a community, but that is not what you go to church for. It's just community. Secular people go to church for community, right? I've talked to people at bigger churches, like I'm like, hey, when did you become a Christian? Oh, I just go here because I just want to make some friends. Like I've literally heard that at churches,
mm,
right?
mhm.
So they're not Christians, but their best friends are at church, so they just go. You can find community at churches, but you can find community at your intramural soccer club or something, right? Like you can find that anywhere. The church is not just extra family. Like it is family. Like the Bible tells us that, yes and amen. but it is much more than that as well, right? The church, as according to Ephesians, is God's plan to display his wisdom to the powers of invisible powers and visible powers everywhere. And it's displayed because people who are natural enemies come together because the walls of hostility have been broken down through the cross of Christ. And so Jews and Gentiles get together, right, because of Christ, right? That wall of hostility has been taken down because of Jesus and what he's done on the cross. And so when you see a Jew and a Gentile worshiping the same God together, that is what displays gospel power. And what that says to the forces of darkness says, our God is wise. You couldn't have pulled this off. Only God could have done this. And that's what the church is where natural enemies come together and love each other. And now that's hard to do. And it's not perfect. It doesn't mean like there's another soapbox we could get on about multi-ethnic churches and things like that, and that having to be the thing. But it's hard to do. But diversity is not just in ethnicity. Diversity can be socioeconomic status. It could be in life stages. It could be age. It could be anything like that. But the point is, people that shouldn't be hanging out together are hanging out together because of one sole reason, which is Jesus, the gospel. It's what brings them together. And they're all feasting together. Tax collectors and Pharisees are sitting together at the table because of Jesus. Like that's what the church is. And you need to capture that vision. If you don't have that vision of the church and you just think, you know what, I just want people to feel safe in a safe community. We want that too, of course. But what if it was a safe community when your enemy is on the other side? Like that displays gospel power, not just a like a small community or things like that. It has to be much more than that. It has to be more common ground than just your same interests, like video games or podcasting or whatever the case is, right? It has to be like clear, the gospel power is here. And that's what the church is there for, is to display God's wisdom in the gospel. And you need to hold on to that before you think about going on to the pastorate. Because if you're there because you just want to help people, then be a therapist, like counseling. That's a honorable vocation to go into. That's fine. That's great. Just do that then. But being a pastor is you have caught. You are serving a huge God, and you are serving his people, a huge God's people in his church. And you need to have that vision before you go into pastoral ministry. Otherwise, you're going to burn out, I think. So, yeah.
I'm trying not to get emotional. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Paul, because I think that was more than just advice, right? It's like that's the truth. And I think the reason I feel emotional is because some days I forget. A lot of days I forget. I think that piece about what God's church looks like and its purpose, right? Yeah, like I feel like I need to ask God forgiveness. I feel like I so often want to do all the things. And I'm not saying that's not okay. I'm just saying it is bigger than I could ever imagine or understand. And so, so I'm really grateful and thank you for taking the time to share it with me. I really appreciate it. So I also ask people. sorry. I'm like so I'm in it is why I'm in it.
It's okay. Yeah, I'm down. I'm okay.
If there's somebody listening that maybe has more questions or just finds you super interesting, but seriously, desires to want to know more transparently about what it looks like to be a pastor, would you be open to me connecting you with them?
Yeah, absolutely. That was my biggest hope with, and why I took this opportunity to join the podcast too, was yeah, because more and more, I just think we need more pastors in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
I know I need more pastors in my church. I need help, but just not just in my church, but any local church. Like, I think like we just need multiple pastors in every church. And so, yeah, send them my way. I'll send you my email. I'm off social media. Like I have it open, so if you want to look for it, you could, but I probably won't respond. I check it every now and then, but yeah, you're more than welcome to. I'll send you my contact info and you can pass it out if they ask for it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Paul, thank you so much again. I really appreciate. Oh yes, one last thing.
Yes. I forgot about this.
You have some resources that you felt like would be valuable to our listeners. Can you share them real quick?
Yeah. So this book, it's called The Path to Being a Pastor.
Wow, I need
Bobby
that
Jameson.
one.
This is probably the best, most readable book on becoming a pastor that I've ever read. So there are lots of books about with the deep theology and so on and so forth, but this one was just, it was like a mentor was sitting there and I was just asking questions, he was just answering what his experience was like, and it was very practical, very helpful, and I would recommend this to anybody who is thinking, I think this is the book you need to read before you even consider the fact. So please, so here's this book. The other book is called The Gospel at Work. It's by How the Gospel Gives New Purpose and Meaning to Our Jobs. I thought this would be just helpful for your podcast in general, not just pastors, though I think all the same applications apply to being a pastor, but any job, furniture designing, theme park designing, accountants and data analysts and whatever. This would be a super foundational, helpful book, I think, just considering how the gospel applies to how you do your job, and how that affects it. So, but yeah, so I just wanted to share these two resources because I think they really will be helpful in both being a pastor and just being a Christian at your work, essentially. So.
Yeah, awesome. Those are really great. It's like literally just the title is like straight to the point,
super straightforward. Yep.
Let's not mess around here.
Yeah.
So clear. Yeah, and Paul has generously offered to give away some books. So I'm just gonna say it here, the first 2 people to DM me on Instagram, I'll send you a book, or Paul will send you a book.
Yeah. So she'll connect you to me. I'll ask for your address and I'll mail it to you.
Perfect. That's awesome. So first 2 people DM me, okay? But yeah.
The first person will get this one. Well, should I just do it by request? No. First person. No. Actually, request. Which one do you want?
Yeah. Which one do you want?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but what if the first 2 people want the same book?
Whoever asked for it, the one that they wanted first, will get that one. And I'm sorry, you get the second one.
Okay, it's free, okay? Just take
it. Yeah, it's free, please. Yeah. Hopefully the person who asked first will ask for this one first, because this one's much more specific.
Yes.
So that'd be fun if nobody wanted this one. Like, I don't want to be a pastor, but
I'll just buy it for you, okay?
I'll just send it to you instead.
Well, thanks again, Paul. You guys, if you have any questions or you'd like to be connected to Paul, you can feel free to DM me on social media, or you can email me at podcastwigu@gmail.com and I'll get you connected right away. Paul, thank you again. I can't thank you enough for your time and just your story and your journey and sharing it with me. Just so honestly, I really had fun. I hope you did too.
Me too. I did. I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Awesome. All right, guys, until next time. Bye.